So I didn't see the explosion, but I felt the concussion on my back, and everything was just gone. I felt like I was all alone all of a sudden because everybody had disappeared in this cloud of dust and smoke.
Hey gang, I guarantee if you're watching the main channel, you're seeing these videos of people in self-defense encounters all the time. People start bleeding, they start bleeding fast. And we as self-defenders should be interested in all the tools that can protect and preserve innocent life. And good trauma gear can do that. It's just as important as a firearm, maybe more so. Trauma is trauma. Whether it's a vehicle accident, a farming accident, or a gunshot wound, when seconds count, you need the right equipment for the job. You must get your trauma gear from a reputable source, and Mountain Man Medical is ASP's go-to source for all of our medical gear. Go to mountainmanmedical.com and let them know you heard about them on the Ask Podcast. All right, gang, welcome back to the Active Self-Protection Podcast. I am your host, Mike Williver, your favorite former Fed. With us today, a good friend of mine, Brian McLaughlin. Brian is the Director of Medical Training at Mountain Man Medical, a sponsor of the show, in full disclosure. He is formerly an EMT, an emergency room tech, and served as a field medic in the United States Marine Corps/Navy. And did tours in Afghanistan, all of that, which we will talk about later on. Brian, man, thanks so much for being on. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
We talked about this. Brian was at the national conference, the ASP National Conference in Kansas, and we met and discussed him coming on the show, and so we're finally getting that in. And I'm stoked to have this conversation. I think it'll be very, very interesting. One of the things that a lot of people in the 2A community and the self-defense community forget to talk about is what happens if there is a shooting or a stabbing or a car accident and someone's injured and you have to deal with that. In my opinion, getting at least some basic medical training is as important, if not way more important, than honestly getting firearms training or jujitsu or anything else, because the odds of you coming across somebody injured who needs help are probably greater than getting in a shooting or getting into a knockdown drag out with someone, as long as you're not doing stupid things at stupid times with stupid people in stupid places, that is. With that said, Brian, let's talk about your background a little bit. I think it's very, very interesting. I think our audience will find it fascinating as well. Where were you from originally?
Born and raised in Denver, Colorado, and spent some time out on the plains, hunting, fishing, camping, and that kind of stuff. My dad was pretty into preparing for Y2K, so I had my own battle kit, when I was 14, and he taught me the basics of combat shooting. Did a lot of IDPA and things like that before I joined the military, and then got hooked up with the Marine Corps as a corpsman, which, for those of you that don't know, it's like a medic, only better. Medics are in the Army, corpsmen are in the Navy. Right. So we deploy out there, and I had a really good time. I went to Afghanistan, saw a decent amount of combat there. Spent some time in the ER as an EMT and an ER tech, and then ran a couple of clinics and that kind of stuff after deployments. So just been in the medical field in some sort of capacity for, most of my adult life. So I've been enjoying it.
Very cool. So are you still in Colorado? Are you back there now?
Nope, still in Colorado. I had to move back. I've been all over the world. Colorado's my favorite, so I had to come back.
I've only been a couple of times. I spent a couple of days there years ago. An absolutely enchanting, beautiful place, and some of the nicest people you're ever going to meet. And people forget it's in the Midwest, because it technically is Midwest, right, Colorado?
That's what I say. I've had a lot of people tell me that it's not. We've always considered it Midwest, but the real Midwest people, like in Minnesota and those types of places, disagree. So I don't know. I think it's Midwest.
Next time I see Neil Widener, I'll ask him what his opinion if Colorado is in fact Midwest or West. Talk to us a little bit more about the training you had prior to the Marine Corps. I think it's really important because a lot of the folks listening to this aren't military. They've never been military or law enforcement or whatever. So they're not going to get that level or that type of training. You said you did IDPA and some other stuff. Talk to us about the training you did prior to the Marine Corps.
Well, prior to the Marine Corps, I didn't really do a whole lot. My dad was a career firefighter and an EMT, so I learned the basics of trauma medicine from him as a kid. He also was the assistant chief of our local rural fire department, so I would go with him on a couple of calls, got to see him in action a couple of times. It gave me the chance to kind of see somebody in action who was experienced and how well they handled the situation. Mm-hmm. Everybody else would be, losing their minds, and my dad would be very calm, cool, and collected. And so I had kind of that as an example to go off of when I joined the military, and that's something I wanted to kind of foster in myself. which is more difficult to do than you might anticipate. But, after a little bit of experience, you get a couple of calls under your belt and you start to kind of figure things out. And that starts to help quite a bit. So I joined the military, went to Corps school, learned my field medical training from them so that I could deploy with the Marine Corps and to do all the fun stuff. I was hoping I would get to blow some things up. That's why I chose that particular route as a corpsman. And as a corpsman, you can kind of go in a bunch of different routes. You can be in the laboratory and you can be doing pharmacy type stuff. And that was not really my interest. I wanted to be in the action, seeing all the stuff. And I definitely got a good opportunity to do that. So it was a good experience.
So were you Parris Island or San Diego?
I was in San Diego, but I'm not a Marine. I was just a corpsman. So it's, the Marines don't have their own medics. So traditionally they pull from the Navy since they are technically a part of the Navy. They don't like to admit that, but they are. So traditionally they pull their medics from the Navy. So I was technically Navy. And then I spent all of my time with the Marine Corps, though. They tried to put me on a boat once and I did not want to go. I wanted another combat tour. So I didn't go. You learn how to play the game a little bit. You can make your own decisions. And I was high enough up there, I could do that.
Right. So talk to us about Afghanistan. I think it's something like less than 1% of the total U.S. population is ever enlisted in the military in any way, shape, or form. And so that means that not that many people probably even know anyone in the military. For the people who don't know anyone who's been in a combat type situation, who's never been to Afghanistan, who's never been in a situation like that, could you kind of just give our audience a kind of a taste of what it's like to be in Afghanistan and to be in a combat environment?
Sure. Yeah, I think it definitely changes person to person. I mean, just the guys on my team that had the exact same experience will probably give you much different stories about their experiences. But for me, it was something I always wanted to do. I grew up with stories. My dad was in during Vietnam, and I just loved his stories. And it was always a dream of mine to be in the military in some sort of capacity. Combat was my primary goal. Of course, being one of the young hard chargers, that was my passion. I wanted to do that. Fell into the role as a medic or as a corpsman, and I didn't really enjoy the whole medicine aspect of it. It was more of just my role and my position in the team. The medicine was just, my part of the teamwork to help out quite a bit. I was mostly interested in being in the stack and trying to be up as close to the action as I could possibly get. So I really enjoyed my time. It was very hard, very difficult, a lot of brutal things that happened. The environment over there is very hostile, just, with sand and the heat and all that kind of stuff. And all of it was very difficult, but I had a good time with it. I learned a lot about myself and the world, and it was something I did well. And I enjoyed it. It was definitely an odd time. I had quite a bit of experience beforehand with trauma medicine, working in the ER, but it's a lot different, when you're working in a sterile environment like a hospital, and then you transfer over to the grit of combat. Things change up quite a bit. And I tend to have kind of a knack for keeping my cool under pressure. And it was something I definitely wanted to develop, seeing my dad handle some of those medical emergencies, and then also being able to witness some of the finest corpsmen and medics I've ever seen operating in a wartime environment. I wanted to be like that. So something that I would do that helped me out quite a bit was scenarios. I would run through scenarios in my mind, and I would try to see every opportunity that I could. We taking a knee during a patrol, instead of start thinking about home and wishing I could get a nice cool drink of water, I would start shifting my focus to, if I got hit with an IED right here and right now, what would I do? What wounds would I see? How would I take care of those wounds? And I would just put myself into a scenario and then start throwing myself curveballs. What do I do if? How do I react if? And I would start coming up with type things like that. But additionally, what I would do is I would also see myself being the hero in that situation, being calm, cool, and collected, making the right decisions, how my face would look, how my voice would sound. And I could understand that because I had seen some very good combat medics do that. And so I had an example of what that would look like. And I was very pleased to discover after doing that for a little while that that's exactly what would happen. I would start to treat every situation because I'd already been through it a bunch of times in my head, and I'd already made those types of decisions. And my reactions were much faster. My decisions were much better, and I handled the situation much more effectively. So that was something that I learned that really benefited me. And since I've been out of the military, I've had a chance to kind of look more into this kind of thing, and it's not new. The sports psychologists have been doing these and talking about this type of stuff for a long period of time. It's as a way, especially for an athlete to recover after an injury. They lose all that time, that downtime while they're recovering. They're not training, so they're losing their edge. So a way to maintain that edge is scenarios. So that helped me out quite a bit.
I can't say enough about, I call it mental reps. It's the same thing. Whether it is in your case, envisioning, okay, this happens, so my partner gets shot here, what do I do? And I love that you include, how does my face look? How does my voice sound? I think that might sound very strange to some people who've never been in a position like this. I think it might sound like, what do you mean how your face looks? No, it's important how your face looks. We like to say here at Active Self-Protection, I'm sure it's not an original, motto or catchphrase or whatever, but calm is a superpower. Mm-hmm. If you can remain calm, there's an old, I can't remember who, there's an old English poem. If you can keep your head about you and all those around you are losing theirs, then you'll be a man, my son. I quote that quite frequently. Meaning that if you can keep calm and you can look at a situation and analyze it under pressure when everyone else is screaming and yelling, and you don't let that affect you. Now, part of that, I think, is just you're born with it, honestly. I think another part of it is just reps, mental reps and actual reps. Like you said, you get to watch your dad over the years stay calm and just handle business and do what he had to do and not get emotional in a moment under stress. And then I think, having said that, I think the idea of mental reps is critical to any kind of training. Like, I love that you mentioned sports psychology, because a mental rep for an NFL wide receiver is helping him envision, the ball coming in. He's keeping his eye on it. He's keeping his kind of glancing over at the safety or whatever, and seeing the ball go into his hands, and seeing himself cross the goal line into the end zone. I would tell young agents with my former agency, if you're driving around or you're sitting on surveillance and doing something boring, take that time and use, like you said, take a knee instead of worrying about being home, with my girlfriend and having a Coors Light. Let's go over and do a mental rep where I have this downtime. So yeah, I love that you said that. And like I said, if one of my young guys was bored or didn't have anything to do on surveillance, be like, just do mental reps. Just say, okay, I'm sitting here in this car right now. What happens if, what would I do if? And then envision all the pieces and parts of the what if scenario at that point. You're in a gang neighborhood, gang member identifies you as Ellie, and now he's walking towards your car, aggressively. What do you do? It's a good question, because it happens all the time. Those neighborhoods where people aren't afraid to be like, hey, that's a cop. Let's go, let's go make some noise and point him out and potentially harm him. So after the Marine Corps, you've had a bunch of really interesting jobs, I think. So did EMT, were you like a field EMT, like in an ambulance, or what was that about?
I did run a rig occasionally, but primarily I was working in the ER. Especially when you're in the military, you have the option to work in an ER, and if the doctors really like you, they kind of like take you under their wing and be like, "Come here, doc. You're going to need to know this at some point, so come learn this." So I had a really good chance to ask a lot of questions and get taught like the proper way to think medically. So that really helped me out quite a bit. And since then, I've had I had a friend that passed away last year, but we had started a nonprofit organization where we were helping out faith-based organizations on their security for preparing for an active shooter or a mass casualty trauma event. And that was kind of like my chance to understand a little bit more about psychology, because I would have people that would approach me and they would say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? How do you deal with the blood? and they would say, like, I see myself in those situations and I see myself just falling apart. And for a little while, that really confused me because I thought, like, well, you have to do something. If you don't, someone will die.
Right.
I mean, that's plenty of motivation for me to go out and get a little bit bloody. And even though I would rather not, I still think it's gross. But at the same time, that's a job that needs to be done. I need to put that aside because someone's life is on the line. And I would say that to them and they'd like, I still don't think I could do it. I might just pass out just looking at the blood. And that's where it kind of gave me that opportunity to kind of think about, like, well, what makes me different from them? And I'm not any different, really. I mean, you are born with a certain innate ability, I think, but you're also can cultivate that ability in yourself if you desire to.
Absolutely.
Yes. And I think that's what I did. My first couple of times when I was working on people, I was flustered and I made the wrong decisions. And unfortunately, some people didn't live through that. And that really, really bothered me. And that helped to motivate me to become better, to learn my job better, to see the things differently. And like you said, how your face looks is important. Because not only is that doing something for you, if you have a confident look on your face, you're going to feel more confident, but that confidence transfers to your casualty quite a bit. If you're hurt really badly and you see some medic running up to you who is just freaking out,
right,
they're terrified. That's not going to leave you with a great impression. You're going to be okay. So an important part about being a medic is being calm and cool under pressure, not just for yourself. That helps a lot, but especially for your casualty. If you can approach that calm and cool, they're going to be much more calm and cool themselves.
Yeah. As a law enforcement veteran, I can say that the last thing you want when the officer or deputy or agent shows up at your house or your business is for them to be running around with their hair on fire and out of control. You want, like you said, that sense of calm, that the look on your face, the tone in your voice transfers to your casualty. Well, it transfers to, in a self-defender context, it transfers to the person you're defending yourself against. For example, if your voice gets super high pitched and you're trembling and you seem unsure of yourself, that's not going to end the threat as quickly as confidence and composure and calm being that superpower that we talked about. Tell us, what does an ER tech do? I've never heard that title before.
So ER tech is like under nurse. You got your doctors, your nurses, and then the ER tech assists the nurses and the doctors. And they, so I would do minor surgeries, sutures, anything else, any vital signs, and then sticking people for IVs and that kind of stuff. So you're just an all over type of person. So I worked my way up into there as a shift leader and then running the supply for the ER and that kind of stuff before I had the chance to go to Afghanistan. So it helped me out quite a bit, being able to get into quite a bit of that kind of thing. And then occasionally we would take our ambulance out on runs if it was required and go pick people up and take care of them.
Tell the folks at home who have only seen it in movies, what it's like to be in a combat situation and have to treat a casualty, someone who's actually depending on you to save their life, someone who won't live unless you do the right things and make the right decisions.
Well, that's a big question. I would say it definitely changes with experience. The first time that I was in that type of a situation, I was a bit flustered. Bullets are flying and I don't really know what's going on. And something that you can do to try to take away a lot of that fear is training. If you know what to do, it removes a lot of your fear. But the other thing that helps a lot is experience, and that's much more difficult to get. That's why, working through scenarios in yourself is so important. But if you don't get that experience, the next best thing is to get as much training as you possibly can. So I trained quite a bit, of course, before Afghanistan, and now I had the opportunity to put into play what I've been taught. The first couple of times being so flustered and so out of my element, a lot of that information just kind of, right out of your head. So occasionally, I would work on somebody and take care of them. And afterwards I would think to myself, okay, how could I have done that better? And that can be a difficult thing because that can eat you up, all the things you should have done or you could have done to fix things. But at the same time, you also have to give yourself the grace to know, hey, I'm new at this. And maybe I didn't make the right call, and that's okay. But afterwards, instead of letting it destroy you, you kind of get back up onto that horse and you figure out the better way to do it next time. So the very first couple of times, it was very disconcerting, lots of bullets and screaming and yelling and things running all over the place. And then towards the end, you start to kind of get a handle on everything, and everything is, a little more normal. And it goes straight from being absolutely boredom and to absolute chaos just immediately. There was one particular time where a guy hit an IED right behind me. We were pushing up to contact. We were in a pretty rough area, and we would push in to go fight the Taliban on a regular basis. And we pushed into this particular zone and started taking fire pretty much immediately. And while we were maneuvering to engage the enemy, one of my boys stepped on an IED, and he was behind me when it happened. So I didn't see the explosion, but I felt the concussion on my back, and everything was just gone. I felt like I was all alone all of a sudden, because everybody had disappeared in this cloud of dust and smoke. And I could hear my Sergeant Aguilar yelling, "Corpsman up." And I remember running into the smoke thinking, doesn't he know I heard that? Doesn't he know I'm on the move? Sure. Like maybe I wasn't paying attention and I didn't hear that go off or something. I'm like, I got this. I'm on my way. So I go running into that smoke, and I find my Marine laying at the bottom of this crater. And so I jump on him. And the first thing you do is we're taught to put your knee into the pressure points to help control the bleeding a little bit while you start getting out your trauma bag, start getting out your tourniquets. And so while I'm doing that, he's yelling at me to get off of him. The casualty's laying there with missing legs, and I'm trying to work on him. He's telling me to get off of him. And I'm yelling at him, be quiet. I'm trying to get my job done here. And I look up, and one of the Marines is just standing there, just looking, just stunned. And I told him I said, hey, snap out of it, get on that arm, get a tourniquet on. And it brings him around. He starts breaking out a tourniquet and starts working on that arm while I'm getting the leg taken care of. And the whole time we've got Apaches doing gun runs and Hellfire missiles. We have mortars being launched overhead and artillery coming in. And it was about as chaotic as the time that I've ever had. And I was worried there as I was working on this guy that the Taliban would be maneuvering on us, because one of the things that they would like to do is capitalize on that. Of course, they would want to move in and start shooting us up while we're down a guy or a couple of guys and we're all in confusion. So as I'm working on this guy, I kept shouting over my shoulder, Sergeant Aguilar, are we good here? And he's like, we're good, Doc. Just do your thing. And so I said, okay. And I put my head down, and it was nice to be able to trust my team that much, knew that they had it under control, that I could put my head down and take care of this guy. They didn't have to be so heads up, that they would let me know. So we got him wrapped up, got him taken care of, got him put on the bird, and flew him out, and he lived. And that was definitely one of the rougher experiences of my life. And it was definitely significant. It taught me a lot.
Being able to trust your teammates with your life, literally with your life, that they know what they're doing, that they're paying attention, that they're capable, is a very unique feeling. And I kind of feel bad for people that have never been in a situation like that. They'll never know what that feels like. It's a very unique and distinct feeling. When if you're on a search warrant, you're clearing a house or whatever, you're going to go one way, the other guy's going to go the other way, and you're not looking at what he's doing. If you're flying code 3 and you got a partner in there, he's looking right when you come to an intersection. You're just looking left and straight, and he's going to say clear right, and you go, and you never look right. That kind of trust in somebody else is really, it builds a bond, I think, that nothing else can quite compare to. Not even a Super Bowl championship team, I don't think, could ever be as close as those two people are in a situation like that, or in combat.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how sort of beloved the corpsman is to the combat Marine. I think anyone who is remotely interested in Afghanistan has probably seen the documentary about Restrepo. And so I certainly watched it. I was absolutely fascinating to me and just broke my heart to watch. But they named it Outpost after their medic who was killed in combat. My understanding is that's a real thing. Like you're pretty well taken care of by your team. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's kind of a big difference between corpsman and doc, because there are some corpsmen that go and they're in the lab and in the pharmacy, and those are essential roles. But the combat role of the corpsman is one that's very highly prized, in the community. The Marines really respect that because it allows them to go out and get their job accomplished. After that particular instance that I just described, we were on the way back. And I remember one of my Marines reaching over and slapping my bloody camis. And I was just covered head and toe. And he reaches over and he slaps my camis. He said, "I'm glad you're with us, Doc." And to me, that was one of the most significant moments of my life, because it was my proof that I can do this, and I am a valued member of a team, and that that they appreciated me being there. And that is something that is just I've been searching for that ever since. There's after the military, I had this identity crisis of a sort where I didn't know what to do with myself. I'm not Doc Mack anymore. I'm not HM2 FMF qualified, hard charger. And now what am I? And that was a difficult time for me. And I understand those people that get squirreled away into those 1%er motorcycle clubs. I got involved with that myself, and I thinking about it back as I get older, I'm wondering what about that, right after the combat, I got involved with that. The reason I got involved was because I was looking for my fire team again. I missed that experience so much, and I was just desperate to have it back no matter what. And since then, I've changed my ways, and I've progressed past that particular phase in my life. But it is definitely an understanding now that how important it is to be a part of a team, and what a great feeling that is.
I think a lot of people probably don't know that the Hells Angels was started by World War II vets returning from combat in that exact scenario you just talked about not having that sense of belonging, that sense of camaraderie anymore. So it's very interesting. I never knew that about you. So learning has occurred today on my part. A couple more questions before we move on to what you do medically, training now in Mountain Men Medical. I guess earlier during your story, I wanted to interrupt you and ask, but I held on to the question. Is there no such thing as a field training corpsman in a combat scenario? Are you just thrown out there without any supervision medically? Like, you know what I mean? Like, for example, I would like it if you would go out and for the first month you had a guy with you who had been there and done that, and you could watch him work. Is that not how it works?
It depends on the situation, of course. It depends on what's happening. But yeah, you could be an E3, really low on the totem pole, never been to combat ever before, and get put out right into the middle of the worst combat going on in that area, kind of a thing. And that's definitely unfortunate. You got to learn things the hard way. That's kind of what happened with me. I got sent out there as an E4, as a brand new petty officer, and I had one E3 working under me, and neither of us had done any of this. So we were just kind of doing it as we went. Occasionally, I would get the chance to work with a particular. There was HM1 Hall, which was a big mentor of mine. I only saw him a couple of times when I was in Afghanistan, but watching him work on people and seeing how calm he was really kind of said to me, like, hey, I don't need to be freaked out. I can choose to be calm in this situation. That's what ultimately I need to do. So if I can do that, if HM1 Hall can do it, then I can do it as well. So yeah, we get put out there on our own quite a bit, and you just kind of have to figure things out, and hopefully you do. And most of them do. All the corpsmen that I was out there with were just solid dudes. They just want to see their team come back, and that's motivation enough for them to do better.
That's actually fascinating to me. So talk to us now about Mountain Man Medical. If you had your druthers, and every CCW holder could have a certain amount of training and a certain amount of equipment, what class would you point them to as the class? If you only take one class for medical stuff, Is there such a class? And then what would be your recommended minimum amount of gear, medical gear, to have on your person if you're carrying a firearm?
All right. So I would say the best place to get training, I'm going to have to plug Mountain Man Medical. We've got a emergency trauma response course that we put together for teaching the basics of how to use what's in your trauma kit, basic wound packing and bleeding control with tourniquets and chest seals and that kind of stuff. That's completely free. So if you don't have time to go to an in-person class, then that would be the best option for you. And it'll just teach you everything. Very basic class. About an hour and 15, an hour and 20 minutes or so. I've got a lot of good comments on it from doctors and trauma nurses and prior medics and that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty confident in the information that I'm putting out. But that's also something you want to make sure that you're continuing to get that training. Things change quite a bit. Year over year, they're coming out with new research and new techniques and procedures and new equipment. So if you haven't had training in a while, then it's always beneficial to be brushing up on that because things change so rapidly. And in-person training, Mountain Man Medical I'm also putting on classes here and there at different places. I put on classes at the Active Self-Protection Conference, which I really enjoyed. I had a blast out there. Everybody in the active self-protection community was so awesome. I had a very good time. Just a wonderful group of people out there having fun and learning how to fight. I really enjoyed that. So if you want to come get in-person training, Active Self-Protection is one of those places. I'm putting on different conferences and training events around the country. So if you go to mountainmanmedical.com, click on the training tab, that's a good place to do that as well.
Let me digress for a minute, because it doesn't even have to be a CCW holder. You could just be someone who wants to be prepared in the event that you come across someone who needs help. My youngest son, the one who's battling cancer right now, that's him. He got training, and I think you met him at the conference. He was the one leading worship, and he stopped at car accidents. He's applied bandages and stopped bleeding and all sorts of stuff, because it's just something I think some people have. So that said, self-defender or not, someone who is going to be out and about with medical equipment on their person. I say on their person advisedly, because if it's in your car a block away, it's not going to be any good to you whatsoever. Someone could bleed out in the time it takes you to go get it. So walk us through what someone should have on their person, and like, for example, where they would carry it. There's different options for that as well. Talk to us about that, Brian.
All right. Well, I think ultimately skills are weightless. The more skills you have in your toolbox, the better you're going to be able to do. Learning these things are not hard. They let people like me do it. Anybody can do it. It's not difficult. Trauma medicine, of course, you can go to school for a very long time to learn a lot of stuff about trauma medicine, right? They have doctors. But keeping someone alive is not that difficult. There's just some key things that you need to know. And if you remember those things, you're going to do just fine. So I would say ultimately skills should be your priority. And then after that, you can use those skills to use your trauma gear. But if you don't have any trauma gear on you, the most important thing to remember is bleeding control is still possible. A direct pressure is something that could save somebody's life very, very easily. If you see very, very bad bleeding, putting a hand directly over the wound and pressing down hard and controlling the bleeding with direct pressure is important.
Very hard, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. You need to, try to direct pressure. We want that pressure to clamp off that artery and control that bleeding. So if you can understand the skills, then if you don't have trauma gear, then you can still make a difference. But trauma gear is one of those items that really helps you out, especially in a defensive encounter. If I can apply a tourniquet, I don't have to sit there and hold pressure on that wound. I can shift my focus to the battlefield and see those threats coming and take care of those problems as they arrive. So it helps to free up your hands to do other things, maybe take care of other wounds, take care of other people. So having trauma gear nearby or on you is a good idea. The problem is we're already carrying a bunch of stuff. You got a flashlight and a knife, and you got a spare magazine and your pistol. Yeah. Oh yeah. You've got all of this stuff on you all the time already. So are you going to be carrying around like a trauma bag? Probably not. And cat tourniquets and soft tees are great tourniquets. I've used both of those on multiple occasions and they work very well. But the problem is that they only work on your arms and legs, which is great if you have an injury to your arm or leg, but there's also a good chance that you're going to take a wound somewhere else on your body.
So no tourniquet around the neck is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, right? Depends on how much you like that person. So carrying a cat tourniquet or a soft tee is definitely possible. I don't generally prefer to do it. Cat tourniquets especially are kind of big and bulky. They don't pack very well into your pocket. But something that would work is what's called a SWAT tee. Now, this is not one of the standard ones that you see very often around. A lot of people prefer the cat and the soft tee because they're used to that. That's what they were shown in the military, or their military buddies have shown them that that's what they should have. Sure. Those work great in the military, but we're civilians now. We're not running and gunning on a daily basis. And it's just like a pistol. If the pistol is uncomfortable to carry, are you going to carry it? No, it's eventually you're going to leave it at home. You're going to forget it and you're not going to do it. So my preferred way to carry a tourniquet is the SWAT tee. And this is just a stretchy band. And SWAT stands for stretch, wrap, and tuck. So you stretch it around the limb, and I'll show how to do this on the Mountain Man Medical training, but you stretch it around and it provides circumferential pressure. And this is an excellent way for carrying a tourniquet on you at all times. Additionally, you can use this to pack wounds. So if you do take a wound to your neck or to your armpit or your groin or any of these other junctional places, you have massive bleeding you can't control with a tourniquet. Now you have a way of doing that. So you can cut a piece of t-shirt, pack the wound, then you take this, wrap it around, you'll tie it off a couple of times. And what this will do is drag pressure down onto the wound and act as a pressure dressing and help keep that person alive.
Unfortunately for our audience, this is still an audio only, but what he did was imagine a sash, like a Miss America sash. So he's basically just putting it over his shoulder. And the idea being you're going to hold whatever dressing you have handy, whether it's a piece of t-shirt or whatever, you're going to wrap that around under your arm, say over your shoulder, wherever the case may be, wherever the wound is. And it's going to keep pressure on that packing, which is really neat. Is this a Mountain Man Medical exclusive? I've never seen this before.
No, this has been around for quite a while. It's not one of the more commonly used ones because it's not TCCC approved, and TCCC is the Committee for Combat Casualty Care. They're the ones who look at different things and say whether or not it's approved for combat. And of course, the cat tourniquet and the soft tee are approved for combat. The SWAT tee is not approved for combat because of the way you just tuck it under itself. It has the potential of coming off more easily than a cat tourniquet. But in my experience, if you tuck this under nice and tight, it's going to stay in place just fine. So this is not a problem for us civilian defenders. Having something that can take care of not only extremity wounds, but also as wound packing. And you can cut off a square of this, tape it down, and now you have a chest seal. Or you can make a sling out of this, or just pretty much anything that you can think of. You're limited only by your creativity. This thing is like carrying an entire trauma kit in your pocket. So if I go out, if I'm going someplace, I'll have one of these tucked down into my front pocket. It's rubber, so it's not digging into you while you're sitting there watching your movie or whatever the case is. It packs really easily, and you can throw these into a bunch of different places, your wife's purse, your kid's backpack, in the door panel of your car. So it's just a great item to have everywhere.
Talk to us about Mountain Man Medical and what the mission there is.
So I get a chance to, Mountain Man Medical is based primarily on my experience. So everything in the trauma kits are things that I think are going to be your best options. And they're all like high quality stuff that I've used, like North American Rescue, cat tourniquets, and TACMed soft tees, and all of these different things that are really important to have, that have a lot of data backing up that they're useful and effective. So I wanted to make sure that we stocked our kits with the highest quality items that we could get, but still maintain a good price point so that more people could have their own trauma kits. One of the hard things that I've noticed is a lot of these medical companies will put out a trauma kit and charge a lot of money for them, which I get it. Money is important and everything, but I would like to see more trauma kits in the hands of more people. So having a good price point is very important to me. I would feel really bad if people just couldn't afford my trauma kits, and that's why they didn't have access to high quality gear. So I'm very confident in the prices we have. I haven't seen anybody that's charging what we charge for our trauma kits. So my mission is essentially get more trauma kits into more hands, help more people, get them that training so that they can actually use the items that are in the kit. That's why we offer the course for free. So we don't charge for it. We want you to be able to use the stuff when it counts the most.
I did not know that the course was free and that you guys are trying to make it more affordable. One of my previous guests, I'm sure you've heard of, being in this community, Stephen Williford from Sutherland Springs, Texas, who is the hero who ran across the street barefoot and stopped a deranged man who was shooting up a church. He had an AR and a few rounds of ammunition. And Stephen, during our talk, had mentioned there was a police officer, a local police officer at that little town. Might have been a deputy sheriff, I'm not sure, but he had gone out on his own dime and bought a bunch of trauma kits and tourniquets for all of his partners. And people were looking at him like, oh, this is a town of 600 people. We don't need all that stuff. And it turns out they did. So I think it's important to let the listeners know that if you're thinking, oh, I'm never going to need this stuff, or I'll never need this training, it's just like anything else. You don't need it until you do. You don't need a firearm until you do. When you need it, you really need it. So I would encourage you to go to the Mountain Man Medical website and avail yourself of whatever training you can do. And if you are interested in this sort of thing and you can afford to get advanced training, I highly recommend it. It's never a bad thing to have more competent people out there in the world milling about who can make a difference in a critical situation. It's a small part of the population that would pull over and stop at the scene of a car accident. But if you're one of those people, I would encourage you to get some training, get just enough equipment to be able to be able to assist somebody in a situation like that. And Brian, what a fascinating talk. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we part ways?
I would say you could follow me on all the social medias. I really have a good time with my YouTube channel. I put out different types of videos talking about this type of stuff. So if you want more free training, you want to come over and have a decent community of people who are just trying to do better in the world with good trauma medicine, then come on over and hang out.
And where would they find you on YouTube?
At Mountain Man Medical. Just type that into YouTube. I'll pop right up.
Okay. And if you're not sure, folks, he's a ruggedly handsome bearded man with blue sunglasses. You can't miss him. Brian, man, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the time.
All right, folks, the main interview is over, so you know what time it is. It's time for the Gutowski Files featuring, no longer starring, featuring my friend Stephen Gutowski of TheReload.com. He's also the host of the Weekly Reload podcast. Give him a look on all the major podcast networks and on YouTube. Stephen, how are you, sir?
Good. I mean, that sounds like a downgrade, though, from starring to featuring. I'm a little upset about that, I'll be honest.
Honestly, if you look at like the modern like hip hop songs, whoever's being featured in the song tends to be the bigger star. So look at
okay. All right. Now I feel better.
My terms are acceptable. All right. So this week we were talking about, again, we spoke recently about the Ukraine, not the Ukraine. And this week we are discussing the fact that some American ammunition makers are donating ammo or getting ammo to forces within the country of Ukraine. And Stephen and I, of course, talked a little bit offline about this before, but there's a lot about this story that I wouldn't have known. Stephen, talk to us about this.
Yeah. Well, so one of the major ammo manufacturers in the United States is now donating 1 million rounds to the Ukrainian army. So, and this is from brands that you guys have absolutely heard of before, which is Remington, CCI, Speer, and Federal Ammunition, all teamed up to donate these rounds. Obviously, they're all owned by the same corporate entity, so they're all owned by Vista Outdoor. But yeah, they're giving 1 million rounds to help the Ukrainian war effort. They actually have a pre-existing relationship with the Ukrainian military. So, I think that gives some assurances to these rounds are actually going to end up over in Ukraine. But I talked to their president for a piece on this over at the Reload, and he said, quote, Remington, CCI, Spear, and Federal wanted to help the people of Ukraine the best way we know how, making high quality ammunition. Federal supported the needs of America's armed forces and our allies for decades, operating the Twin Cities Ordnance Plant, while Remington built well over half of all the small arms ammo used by allies during World War II. This ammo donation is a concrete gesture honoring our company's heritage, supporting America and our allies abroad in the fight against tyranny and aggression. That was from the president of all of those brands, whose name is Jason Vanderbrink. So, that they're viewing this as, something that's essentially a follow-up to their history of making ammunition for America and its allies abroad.
That's a pretty significant financial commitment as well. I mean, consider what ammo is going for these days. They could be selling this directly to the Ukrainian military or to whomever, just commercial customers in the United States. So It's nothing to sneeze at. 1 million rounds is, well, it's at least $1 million worth of ammunition, depending on where you are. I don't know what the calibers are involved here. I assume a lot of them are going to be rifle caliber rounds, but they're not cheap.
Yeah, they haven't released what calibers exactly they're giving. Presumably, it'll probably be, the Soviet style rifle calibers, 7.62, since that's what the bulk of the Ukrainian military is using for their small arms. But you're right; it's a pretty significant donation for the Ukrainian military. I think, obviously, when you look at the American ammo market, 1 million rounds is probably not going to make much of a difference in supply here on the domestic front. But yeah, they could make a lot of money just selling 1 million rounds rather than donating it. But they've also talked, at the same time about how they're working to make sure that the donation doesn't reduce supply on the American market, because obviously that's a huge concern for most American consumers right now. We've seen 2 straight years of ammo shortages. I don't know about where you are, but where I am, they seem to get more back in stock in the last few months, although the prices have remained elevated, obviously. So, they told me essentially that they're working to mitigate the impact of this kind of donation on their normal domestic supplies. Vanderbrink said, quote, our 4 factories have been working 24/7 to meet the historic demand for our ammunition for years now. With the support of our thousands of American manufacturing employees behind us, we're working as hard as we can to help America's interests by supporting ammo at home and abroad. So, it remains to be seen how much of an impact it has in real world on, store shelves in the US, but I would expect it wouldn't be a whole lot, just because 1 million rounds, is, as much as that is really a tiny fraction of what is sold in the U.S. on a monthly basis.
Yeah, 1 million rounds is what I call a good weekend at Neil Widener's house in South Dakota. But I digress. Was there another company you were telling me offline that had pledged to try to get some ammo as well?
That's right, Ammo Inc., which is sort of a smaller up and coming ammo manufacturer that's seen a lot of success in recent years, especially during this latest demand surge that we've all been experiencing. They have had pledged 1 million rounds earlier. I think like right about at the beginning of the invasion. Once President Zelensky over in Ukraine, he famously, when the Americans, when we, I guess, offered to evacuate him from the country, he said he didn't need a ride, he needs ammunition, and that's when Ammo Inc. Pledged to donate 1 million rounds. It's not clear whether they've been able to follow through on that yet, but yeah, I mean that's another very significant, at least pledge to give rounds to the Ukrainians. So obviously you're seeing a lot of Western countries, including the United States itself, donating all kinds of military hardware to Ukraine to help them win this war, and now you're seeing the same thing from at least from ammo manufacturers as well. They're also raising money for humanitarian support through the Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund, which is run by the nonprofit Global Giving. So they're selling T-shirts to raise money for that as well.
I assume if Ammo Inc. does follow up on that and you get a line, you're probably right about it, perhaps over at thereload.com.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've also reached out to Olin Corporation, which owns Winchester Ammunition, which is sort of the other really big player in the ammo market in the U.S., to see what they're doing, if anything. Given what these other companies have now pledged to do, it'll be interesting to see what Winchester does as well. I expect to hear from them soon. So yeah, we'll definitely keep following this over at The Reload.
And folks, this is the kind of story that I had not heard anywhere else until I got on the line with Steven. So that's one more of the list of many reasons why you should go over to thereload.com and get a membership. Give this man a couple of bucks so he can continue doing what he's doing. He's doing it without advertisers right now, without any kind of other support. There's no gun manufacturer or organization funding this. So he's giving you unbiased, unvarnished truth about the Second Amendment and the news surrounding it. So go over to thereload.com, and give him a look. Steven, man, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey friends, this is John Correa. If you like the podcast, if it is bringing you value, do me a favor, leave us a rating and a review. It really helps us out.